Guild May meeting. Tonight we have Lisa Owens, a children's book editor and writer. I have some announcements first. If you haven't signed in, please sign in so we can harass you later. Or at least ask you to join if you're not a member. So first, the Guild is hosting a table at the Pacific Northwest Writers Association conference in July, and we're looking for volunteers. There's a sign-up sheet in the back where you sign up, or you can contact Polly Zetterberg. Is Polly here? I don't see Polly here. Okay, you can find her on the website.
What's the name?
Polly.
No, the date.
July, that's all I know.
End of July. Yes, the last couple of days.
Say it again?
It's the last couple of days of July.
Okay. So, and keep an eye on the listserv for more information. Our next member meeting is July 11th, and it will feature a panel discussing how to identify and avoid biased language. Guild members participating are Christy Karras, Mary Colleen Jenkins, Chris Henderson Bauer, and it will be moderated by Amanda Vale. Save the date for the annual Guild member potluck on Sunday, September 11th, and additional details will be announced later this summer. The Guild member survey, which we've been talking about, it's been delayed, but it should be out to members by later this month or early June. The survey is designed to find out who members are, what we do, and what we want from the Guild in the future. Thank you to our setup volunteers. Are they here? Who are they? And that would be Sarah Kisbaugh. They got to leave early. Sarah Kisbaugh, Kelsey Clockentegger, and Jennifer Monroe. And also thank you to our note taker. Who's that? Thank you. Sally Ginelli. Kathleen, did you have some announcements about board service?
I just have a couple of things. You probably noticed we have an itty-bitty new recording camera. If anybody is interested in being backup help with it, please see me afterwards. It's really simple to operate. We're just going to have a lot of kinks to work out of tonight's operation. But after that, it should be good to go. So please see me after that. And I just have a quick invitation for May 18th, Wednesday. We're going to be meeting at Rioni 13. Anybody who's interested in board service, would love to see you there. We're going to answer questions. Hopefully there will be at least 2 board members there, and you'll get the most current on all the exciting stuff we're doing this year.
Before I introduce Lisa, this talk tonight is being broadcast live on simulcast online. Am I saying that right?
Sure. Yes. Those are both correct.
You can find us through social media channels and on our YouTube page. But it will also be posted later on the Eds Guild website. And by the way, we're taking live questions online. And now to introduce Lisa. Lisa Owens, since the early 1990s, has done editorial work on all stripes of thousands of published products, though admittedly not all at once. These days, she specializes in children's books and also enjoys working with adult-level genres, such as mysteries and thrillers, memoirs, and cookbooks. The author of 90-plus books for young readers, she also writes articles, essays, reviews, PR copy, and K-12 educational materials. Please welcome Lisa Owens.
Well, thanks, Julie, and thanks so much for having me here tonight. It's great to be here. I know a few familiar faces from my days at the Editorial Freelancers Association and elsewhere around the town. But I'm just here to give you what I'm calling a sweepingly specific overview of developmental editing, specifically in the children's book market. And I think I hope you'll find some of this of interest, and if there's ever any confusion, let me know, and we can interrupt and I can answer any questions. I know there's time at the end for questions. And the format's going to be just me kind of going through some roles and responsibilities and definitions, kind of dry stuff. And then I'll do some show and tell with some of my own projects so that we can then kind of come back and talk about what all of those things mean when you're working with children's products. And so, oh, and I hope you found your party favors. I did. I pulled an Oprah and got you tiny notebooks and pencils. so woohoo! And really, I did that because those are the kinds of things that I give out when I talk to kids. I do a lot of school visits as an author, and I teach some workshops. I've done a couple residencies in the schools as writer in residence in the schools. And for me, as both a writer and editor of children's books and other materials, it always helps me to have little reminders about who I'm doing, who the work is for. And so if you're thinking about editing for kids, maybe, or writing for kids, either one, use those little smiley face notebooks and tiny little pencils and think about being a kid with something like that and thinking it's the greatest thing that you ever received from a visiting nobody. So I can kind of skip my who am I slide. I think Julie pretty much covered it, but to give a little more, I'll give a little more detail. So I was a reporter. I started out as a reporter, and when I was looking for a better reporting job, a better paying reporting job, that did not exist. And I found a job as a proofreader in a children's publisher, and that paid a little bit better. And I took that job, was really lucky that, as you would expect, I had to pass the proofreading test. I wasn't looking for editorial work, but I found that I loved it. And even though I loved the reporting work that I'd been doing, I really immediately got immersed in the children's book world. And in my first in-house job, that role demanded that I read about 200 kids' books per year. And that's a lot. And I was reading like I did back in school. I was reading at breakfast and at lunch and at home at night. And I was reading manuscript submissions, and I was also reading so this was a very small publisher, and we were specifically producing books for the school market. But we also produced curriculum materials to go with trade books. So, if somebody if a classroom was reading Mark Twain, we would have all of the Mark Twain books covered in student activity guides and that kind of thing. Or if there was a brand new popular novel, like maybe the Harry Potter first book comes to mind, we immediately jumped on that and made classroom materials to go with it. So I was reading original books for our own list, from submitting authors, and just all the classics and all the brand new market books. And it's the best education I could have ever had. And I know that is that total immersion in the books is what made me want to work with them for the rest of my life. So I spent about 10 years in-house. I was with 2 different publishers, and I freelanced on the side the entire time, always wondering about going out on my own someday. And I also started writing books of my own during that time and published my first one in 1998. And I left in-house work in 2002. And, now it's kind of a lot of years later already. But here's where all the magic happens. It's a basement office. It's cold and dingy. But I have a nice workstation, and I love it. And this is big with the kids. Here's my office assistant. And his name is Ewan McGreyhound because he's charming and likes to emote. But he gets me down to my office at 8:30. He escorts me down there every morning, and then he runs back upstairs to do this for the rest of the day. You know. So what we'll explore tonight is I'm going to start with defining the developmental editor's role, give you, I think, to acclimate you to the whole world, I thought you'd like to know about who the creators are, who the children's book creators are, the markets and the genres, and I have handouts that you'll get later as PDFs, so you don't need to worry about taking too many detailed notes, but I'm going to, kind of walk through a little bit of that. And then talk about the variety of forms that developmental editing takes in children's publishing. There is no one size fits all, and I know that's true in every market, but, I say I know that, I don't actually know that, because I don't do any developmental editing in any other markets. I do line editing or copy editing, that kind of thing, and for adult books. But one thing that I've been astonished about for my entire career is how different the developmental editor's role is from publisher to publisher, from company to company, and often from project to project. And if you go online and you search for freelance developmental editors, and I'm sure some of you are freelance developmental editors, you're going to have your own definitions of what you do and the way that you shape the work. But anyway, and then I'll illustrate those roles that I've held with a few of my projects that I brought. And then I have this massive 6-page list that I will not read to you of resources and tools that I think you're going to like. It's going to help you really dig in. Go home, go online, and look at some of the links and take a break because you'll get overwhelmed. But it's going to tell you everything you can possibly want to know about the children's market, finding work, and think about how you might fit into that equation if that's something you want to do. So to start with, I just made up this definition of developmental editor, and it's the 3 ways that I've worked. And so in children's publishing, a developmental editor is a language professional who first and foremost is there to support the editorial process by doing one of these things. You assume responsibility for the quality of the finished product, and that means that you probably initiate the project, and you see it through from concept to market. It's your baby, but it's owned by the publisher. Number 2 is either you're working with an individual author as a freelance editor, and in that case you are evaluating an early version of their work and advising them how to proceed. That's typically what a developmental editor does, and then if you're continuing to work with that author, you might do additional rounds of editing. It just depends on the relationship you build with that person. And then you can also do that, you can also fulfill that role if you're working for a publisher. Your publisher is the client. And so they'll match you up with an author and say, evaluate this author's work, and you do it in much the same way that you would working on your own. But in that case, oftentimes you kind of get in, you do that work, and you get out. You never talk to the author again. You never see the project again. You have really no ownership of it, and especially when working with an individual author, you are, whatever they want is what they should get from you. And then number 3 is, there are any number of ways that can, the developmental editor can work on the spectrum between those. So, who are the children's book creators? I like to call them the 3 Ps, the publishers, packagers, and people. Not that clever, but that's what came out. Hey, 3 Ps. So the publishers are, of course, the traditional publishers, and those are the ones you're familiar with maybe as the Big 5, which currently the Big 5 used to be more, and it was recently 6, now it's 5. So HarperCollins, Macmillan, Penguin, Random House, Simon & Schuster, and Hachette, whatever. and then the smaller trade publishers, which are still rather big, include Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, Scholastic, Lerner Publications, Lerner Books. Candlewick is a smaller press. Peachtree, Albert Whitman, those are all smaller presses but very well regarded. And then there are the school and library publishers. So a completely different arena, but there's a little bit of intersection, and some common publishers you may have heard of are Capstone, Rosen Publishing, Pearson, of course. And New York is the main hotspot for children's publishing, but a lot of the smaller publishers and educational publishers are in Minneapolis, Austin, Texas, Chicago area a little bit, and Boston, and Florida also has kind of a little contingency of small, hardworking, tiny educational publishers. So next we'll go over the children's book markets, and so I'm talking about these, kind of what they're called and what the market is called and where the books are sold. So, and this will all be on a handout that you'll get later. So we've got trade books, and those are sold primarily to bookstores and distributors, online outlets, also to schools, libraries, and they're considered more literary. Mass market children's books, sold everywhere, bookstores, superstores, your grocery store, members only discount stores. The books are often the same books, they're trade books that are packaged a little differently. They're smaller, they're thinner, they're the things in the racks. You recognize them. Books for the school and library market. Oh, the mass market books are also less expensive than the trade books, just by nature of the way they produce them. The school and library and education market, these are produced specifically to meet K-12 educational needs. And sometimes you'll find a few of them in bookstores if there's a special book that has been marketed that way by the publisher. But often you see them in the public libraries. They're being sold and distributed directly to schools, and so salespeople are on that job full time, making sales calls to schools, stopping in and taking educational publishers' wares to sell. And I've done a lot of work in that arena, and so there are books that can be directly tied to the curriculum. There's always a need for new titles. For instance, I've written 3 different Abraham Lincoln books. The information isn't always that different. Oh, he's fascinating, by the way, so there's a lot of material, as you know. But there will always be a need for Abraham Lincoln books, and schools they destroy the book, they use the books. They're not, there's a limited shelf life for heavily used books, And so they need refreshment at all times, and there's a whole market that is there to give them what they need. And every time the education market goals change from, now it's the Common Core, before it used, it was whole school curriculum, all the different stages and ages of education philosophies. Every time something shifts, then everybody needs all new books. And not that they get them right away, but the demand is always there. And the novelty market books are things like, scratch and sniff, pop-up books, books with stuffed animals, dolls, games, CDs, or books with a distinct regional focus, or based on the landmark, that kind of thing. And you find those more in specialty stores, online, at the zoo, at the symphony, that sort of thing. And then books by self-publishing authors, which sometimes are making it into bookstores if the author's very enterprising and works extremely hard. He or she can sell or can get the book placed, a few copies of it, especially in their local bookstores. But those are most often sold online through the vanity publishers themselves, or the more legitimate, the more legitimate self-publishing spots, Amazon obviously, and let's see, they're the trunks of their cars. So, and I'm not making fun at all of self-publishing authors, because that is such a growing market, and the quality is improving across the board, and sales for well-made books are getting noticed. They're actually starting to review self-published children's books in Publishers Weekly now, and I'm not sure which other publications, but it's gaining traction, because it's not going, that platform is not going away. So let's see, children's book genres. Now I'm using this in the genre in the broadest sense of the word, and each genre carries with it its own standard conventions for format, length, content, reading level, and the expected audience. So we'll start with board books, and an example of a great board book is called Peek-a-Who by Nina Layden. And that's reading level 0 to 3, page count is only about 10, and 0 to very few words is what you'll find in a board book. A picture book, ages 3 to 6 or 4 to 8 are the standard age ranges that publishers target, and they're of course often intended as read alouds for parent, teacher, adult reading to a younger child, and then something that the child can eventually read on his or her own. And those are standard length 24 to 48 pages, but standard is 32. And I wonder if anyone wants to take a guess as to, so the classic standard word count was about 750 words and 800 words when I was a kid, and when I was, even as an adult starting in the business in the 90s. I was a kid a lot longer before that. But I wonder if anyone would like to just guess what the preferred word count is today for a standard storybook. Any guesses? Any guesses? You're going to be shocked.
Higher or lower?
What do you think?
I think lower.
What do you think? Higher? Lower? Who says higher?
Lower.
Lower? Okay, lower. Yes?
300.
Yes? Who said that?
300.
That's pretty good. It's 250 to 300 preferred. Way to go. What's your name? Thank you. Thank you for answering. What's that?
For what age?
For 4 to 8, ages 4 to 8. And so, people are still writing 1,000-page or 1,000-word. Some people are writing 1,000-page picture books. They need help. But 1,000-word picture books are still coming out, but very rarely. 500 words is usually the max that publishers say that they'll even consider. But what they really want is 250 to 300 words, because it's more sales, because people want something. Attention spans have lowered, and I'm not sure that that's not kind of the parents' attention spans too. And but that's what's going on. People want short, quick, and then move on to something new. Still 32. Yeah, so it's right. Lots, big words, big pictures, and you can really have a sophisticated story still with only 250 to 300 words. But there's much lamentation throughout the business that we're missing out on exposing kids to longer sentences and beautiful language, and so we'll see. The tides turn every few years, so we may see a change. Easy readers, those are for ages 5 to 8, and those are 1,000 to 5,000 words, about 48 to 64 pages. Chapter books for a little bit older. Oh, easy readers are things like Magic Tree House, Junie B. Jones. If any of you remember those or have kids or Boxcar Kids. Chapter books for young middle grade. Those are ages 7 to 10 and up to 20,000 words now. So that book range is 3,000 to 20,000 words, and we're talking 48 to 80 pages. Captain Underpants series, if you know that's an example of a young middle grade chapter book, and it's high interest, it's funny, it's great for boys especially. I think girls love that series too. Another one that's another one from that genre is Sarah Plain and Tall, which is a completely different, small little book with beautiful lyrical language and kind of a grown-up story. But that's a chapter book. Middle grade books, middle grade novels, 80 to 160 pages, and they're geared toward ages 8 to 12, and they're up to 40,000 words in that range. And then young adult books, ages 12 and up is standard. 14 and up, sometimes books are marketed to 14 and up because there's explicit language or more adult situations or more difficult emotional situations being explored in the novels. And those books are up, now they're up to 100,000 words, which is long. And what I love about, I love to contrast the young adult with the picture books, because now 100, almost anything goes in either of those types of books. The publishers are wanting longer young adult and they want shorter picture books. But with picture books, you can have no words, you can have it can be graphic novel format, it can be, there can be a message, there can be just something, a poem, something funny. With young adult books now, the trends are for much, much longer, with a variety of, they call them multimedia, so they're graphic novel insets or illustrations or heavily illustrated or, all in text form, in like electronic text format, or social media is big in figures into, chats, the dialogue and such is represented in different ways. So there's just a lot of experimentation going on with the formats of both of those, like bookends. And then other genres include graphic novels. Those are huge. Middle grade and young adult nonfiction picture books. Those can be quite extensive. They're called picture books. Often, sometimes the longer ones look like coffee table books, and they can be beautiful. They're beautifully produced, and others, and then storybook apps. I haven't done anything with those, so you're free to ask questions, but I don't know very much. So those are the genres. And before we start looking then at the editing work, I just had these cool quotes that are writing quotes, but I think they really apply to editing for children. You must write for children in the same way as you do for adults, only better. That's Russian writer Maxim Gorky. Easy to read is hard to write and hard to edit, because you want it to be meaningful. You want the text to follow a standard story arc, even with 250 words, even with 75 words. You need the story arc there. You need a point to the story, or you need a through line for nonfiction. And doing it in fewer words is difficult. Most new writers, the third quote is from Andrea Brown, the second one is Pam Zolman, and she's a children's author. And the third one is from Andrea Brown, a children's literary agent. And she just says, most new writers think it's easy to write for children, but it's not. You have to get in a beginning, middle, and end, tell a great story, write well, not be condescending, all in a few pages. So those are all considerations that editors have to take into account all the time. And everybody wants the same goal, and that's to create a satisfying, a well-written book, well-edited book that has, that's satisfying for the kids to read. And so now I'm going to start talking about the bullet points of the developmental editor's role. And you're going to notice that I have a lot of points to make on that. And so just be cool with it. As the great Steve Winwood said in song, take it as it comes, because you're gonna, if you pursue this kind of work, you're gonna wear many hats, or a big hat that shrinks, and you're just gonna have lots of different expectations put on you by your clients. So here's the role. So a developmental editor works directly with publishers and authors to help facilitate the best product possible under the circumstances. And I added that because the circumstances can be horrible. The circumstances can be that the author has been tasked to write, for instance, not me, this is a project I worked on last year. The author needed to write 6 young adult novels. It had to be gritty and vulgar, and something that would be high interest to kids who don't like to read. So targeting reluctant readers, but with sophisticated vocabulary and X-rated situations whenever possible. And this was a first-time author, and he needed to write 6 young adult novels in 9 months. So how do you think that went? They're published. They're published. And you know, so those are the circumstances. And in that specific instance, when I say, you know, working, you know, facilitating the best possible product, my job in that situation was to know what the publisher would and would not support for the author and for me. I'm sitting there calculating my time on the project so that my hourly rate is, you know, workable. And that's a hard thing to do when you want to make a great book and you want to help the author do great writing. This young man is a really good writer. And he was fresh out of an MFA program and had written something for his thesis and was gung-ho, and he was young enough that he could write all night long. He could churn those books out, and he had some amazing scenes, some amazing passages in these books. And the heartbreak for both of us was that he had to turn around. I had to do my evaluation of the first manuscript, say, in, you know, maybe I got 3 days to do it. I sent him a 10-page editorial letter saying there's no plot. You know, that's tough. It was true, and that's tough to hear. But the publisher didn't really care. So those are the these are real circumstances in publishing, and it's not just in children's markets. But they had much like Adam Sandler movies, they had they had calculated how much money they could make by quickly producing their first season of books. They did 20 series like that. You know, so there were 19 other writers. I worked with one other. The other series was on teen pregnancies, and they wanted, you know, the mantra was as much vulgarity, as much excitement and taboo situations, as many taboo situations as you can fit into the book. You know, we're not going to be politically correct and, you know, foreshadowing what has come to bear in the culture. And the writer then had 2 days to revise. There's no plot in the book. There's 2 days. So my role was to cry with him and to talk with him and be on the phone when he said, I can't find a plot. And it's my job to say, then you can't, because it was going to be due in 2 days, and they wanted it no matter what. And anyway, so we got through that, and that's my spiel on the worst possible circumstances. You could have those circumstances. You could have a year to produce something like that. You could have 5 years to produce something like that, and those would be great circumstances. The developmental editor's approach may be hands-on or hands-off. So hands-on if you're the one supervising the project and it's your call to decide everything from design and layout to who writes it, to, you know, approving the writing, approving the editing. Hands-off, something like that last project I told you about, where the only thing I could do was write that evaluation, and then that's it. That's the end of the road for the editing. There was no other editing. There was proofreading, 1 round of proofreading after that. So, as a developmental editor, you might get involved right after the publisher has acquired a manuscript, or on receiving a draft manuscript from an author that's your client. Alternatively, you might, as I said, be the one generating the idea. This is something that you would only do probably in-house. In some cases, though, you might get contacted as a freelancer when someone in-house has initiated the project and they want somebody to take it over. So that's something that can happen. So moving on to tasks. Propose a project, hire and assign writers, evaluate an author's manuscript. I'll come back to that later. Send out manuscripts for expert review and then filter through those comments and decide what needs to be changed based on them. Collaborate with design and layout colleagues, work with or answer to the marketing team, depending on how, some publishers, marketing teams make all the major decisions about what gets published when and what focus the publisher is taking. Maybe you're going to write, as the editor, you've got a product line and you're going to write the prototype. That's something I did. I'll show that later. But so I was a freelance developmental editor for, this is from Stone Arch Publishing in Minneapolis. It's a division of Capstone. And I was tasked with creating high interest, low vocabulary graphic novels they were billing them as safe graphic novels of classic tales. And so I wrote the prototype to explore how that could be done. How, taking the 200-page novel Black Beauty and reducing it to I think it's 2,500 words in here, and it's possible. You can do it. And they're really beautifully produced. But so my role was to create the prototype, determine a game plan for, the rest of the production for the series, and then hire the writers, do the first round of editing with the writers. I created the style guidelines, not the copy editor. And then once the first 6 books in the series were off to the printers, then I had nothing to do with the series anymore. That's something that they took all of that, those processes and went to town with them. And I think now they have at least 100, if not more, of similar graphic novels in that series. Yeah.
As a copy editor who does mostly nonfiction, I don't know what the term graphic novel means.
Oh, okay. Graphic novel is like a comic book. So instead of it's comic book format, here you can look at it. Is this okay if I move? And so there's narration at the top of most new sections, and then all the dialogue takes place in speech bubbles. And the picture, much like with picture books, the illustrations really show part of the story. And they're just huge, and they bring a lot of kids into reading. I've actually been lucky enough to hear from and talk to kids who've read some of these and say, I thought and so these were marketed for 8 to 12-year-olds, but they're also being used in higher level classrooms for struggling readers, where maybe the class is, so other titles were Hunchback of Notre Dame. I'll just stop with that example because I can't think now. And kids who say, I thought that story was going to be boring. And I mean, they're riveted to they're riveted to the illustrations, and it pulls them through the story. And then I've heard from people who've said, I think I'd like to read the real Black Beauty now. And so, I mean, it's really that's one of the gratifying perks of that kind of work. So prototypes, catalog copy, web copy, cover copy, front and back matter. sometimes ancillary products. For instance, I edited a book called The American Revolution. That's what it's about. And it's a nonfiction book for middle graders. And so I hired the writer, edited the book, and then because I was so close to that book, I wrote the activity book for schools that has, various ways to, just different activities. You can look at these. I'll pass them around for making connections with the history and reading, those kinds of things. Math during the American Revolution, stuff like that. Continued. Developmental editors, also do big picture substantive editing work. So, there is some working with the text. A lot of times developmental work is really not touching the text, just talking about the text, telling the author what to do with the text, but not having any leeway to go in and move a word or say that's spelled wrong, But bigger picture tasks can be establishing the guidelines for a series or just for a book. Articulating and enforcing the voice, level, tone, and focus of, that falls under the series head. So, for instance, this graphic novel series had definite objectives that went across the board to every book. So every book had a glossary and an index and links to further reading and vocabulary kind of built in a little bit, but not too much. Cheerleading, that harkens back to my young adult novel writing guy. So you might be cheerleading to support him or her in, when I say retaining ownership, what I mean is not necessarily like the monetary ownership or the copyright, but I mean making sure that the author's vision is what's represented in the book and not mine and not the publisher's, to a certain extent. And then also, again, you always do have to achieve the publisher's goals. So, and then other tasks include suggesting rewrites. Sometimes you're in the position of being able to require them. And other times you're in the position of having to do them because of certain circumstances. Either the author tried and wasn't able to wasn't able to do what they were supposed to, or there's no time and the publisher says, you're up, do it. So quickly, I'll move on to what I said I'd get back to, because children's manuscript evaluations are something that you can do, that you do as an editor for a publisher or when you're working with individual authors. And these are all the things that I always cover in a children's book evaluation. So basic concept, title, execution, the book structure, the rhyme scheme and meter if appropriate, characterization, author's tone and voice, perspective, point of view, is it consistent, is it appropriate, any notes on mechanics like grammar and usage if there are things that they need to watch out for, reading level, vocabulary, is an audience and market, are those things appropriate for the age they're targeting, and then offering thoughtful recommendations for next steps. When I work with individual authors, very often the only thing I do is a manuscript evaluation. And very often, and usually I insist that that's where we start, or I make a good case for it. Because what I usually find, or not, I just often find that what needs to happen is further writing. They're not ready, the manuscript is not ready for an edit. And it's really important for the writer to take the time to, bring their own work out. You want it to be the writer's vision. You want it to be the writer's best work. And the other, something that I always share with writers when I'm giving this kind of recommendation is that I don't recommend that they necessarily have somebody do a developmental edit, because once they start especially if the road is they want to submit to publishers. If they're self-publishing, that's a different story. But if you're submitting to publishers, that editor wants, if I'm submitting to a publisher, the editor wants my work. They want the writer's vision. I'm speaking as a writer. They don't want what, style and plot and structure that has been imposed by an outside editor. They may, the in-house people want to be able to have their own opinions about what the book should be. And if you're not submitting your authentic work, which I think there's an argument to be made that if you have it edited and you give the editor carte blanche to do whatever he or she thinks is correct, you've kind of lost control of the book. And why put yourself through that when the publisher is going to put you through it later, put the book through its paces later? So what usually happens with individual authors who come to me is I do a manuscript evaluation, and then if I think it needs rewriting, that's what I say, and I tell them how to go, I give suggestions for going about it. And then if they don't want to go that route and they want further editing, I'll offer copy editing. So that's my stance. I don't personally do developmental editing for individual author clients unless it's a really special case. Yeah.
Could you maybe explain a little bit more, because this is something that I come into a lot, or that people talk about the words differently.
Yes.
So you just talked about what a manuscript evaluation is for you. Could you talk about what you mean by developmental editing that you won't do?
Yes. So in the evaluation, I'll give my thoughts on all of those elements. I won't go in and fix the plot. I won't go in and create a new introduction or use, I could affect a uniform tone, find a voice, it's going to be mine, or I could try to do what, I can try to mimic what I think is the author's, but I don't think that's my place to do.
Is there a point where it is? Is there a point where your developmental editing does go in and creates the introduction or creates that plot?
If I'm working for a publisher, if that's what's required. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think that you can point out something that maybe hasn't occurred to the right, or maybe you don't go that route. Like, this is where I think this voice is coming from. Is that?
Yes. Oh,
something like that.
yeah, definitely.
You're just not sticking something in.
Right. I'm just not physically working with the text in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa, could you repeat the questions when you read them, please?
Yes. Rebecca asked me to. I don't know what that question was now.
Well, and I think this is following up on her question of what don't you do? And it's nice to get some clarity around, yes, I'll say that the tone isn't, or the voice isn't particularly strong, but I may suggest that this character here seems to be carrying the story, or something along those lines. I mean, that's, I think, the specificity that I'm curious about, because I've been part of the literary fiction for
Yeah,
do a lot of developmental editing.
right.
And I'm just curious, like, is some of that something that you would do as
Well-
someone being paid?
Yeah, okay, so things that I wouldn't do as a developmental editor, and I know it sounds like I have this really hard line, and I guess I do, but that's because I just would rather do other work. So it's not that, it's not a moral stance, even though it sounds, it's kind of one. But it's not wrong to do it. It's not wrong if for other editors to do, you know, to do what I don't do. Truthfully, I don't do those things because I don't want to. And because I do care, you know, I know the writer cares about the book. I care about the book. I come at it from a writer's point of view, and I would rather learn to do what I need to do for my own writing, you know, than have somebody else do it for me. And so I'm comfortable giving writers tips and showing them resources. And, you know, for instance, I worked on a picture book last fall that was a rhyming picture book that did not rhyme. And it was really a great experience. It was a phenomenal experience working with this author, because she went and she took all the resources. I thought it was a disaster. I thought, this is not going to work. It can't possibly. And she was being published by a hybrid publisher. So that's, have you heard of Inkshares? Inkshares does, they have a traditional publishing model, sort of, but so it's self-publishing meets traditional publishing, and authors can submit their work with kind of let Inkshares know what kind of a fan base or potential buyers base they have. And if Inkshares accepts the book, they'll create a crowdfunding campaign for them, for the author, and do all that work, take all of that off the author's shoulders, and then get things professionally edited and designed and marketed. And so that's what this was. This was a picture book, and so I'm not going to go in and create, you know, 32 rhymes where there aren't any, because that's writing the book. And you know, that's a smaller book, so that makes it a little more of a big deal. But yeah, I just feel very strongly about helping the author come into his or her own writing, because, you know, they only get to work on these books once for 1 to 50 years. And I want it to be theirs. Yeah.
I'm just curious, how did they resolve that? Did they not know how to rhyme?
No, they didn't.
How
And
did they sell their idea?
she asked how did the author not know how to rhyme? And I mean, no. But the resolution came because that author went away and studied and just crammed. And she was very smart, and she had she had a cute core story, and she had a message that she was trying to put forth in this story. She had all the enthusiasm in the world, and she went away and learned. And I was blown away. I was blown away by what she sent back to me, because I truly believed this was like, okay, I said my piece, but wow, no rhyming. I mean, they were attempts at rhyming, but you know, she just turned it around. And so from that point, because I was working for the publisher was my client, and so I did edit the text at that point, but she had made a completely new book. She came back with a completely new story and words to tell it. let's see, on working with authors. Remember that editorial feedback is scary to writers every damn time. It doesn't matter how seasoned you are as a writer, there's some dread. I mean, yes, writers can take it well and be fine, but you know, nobody loves having their work critiqued, no matter how constructive the criticism is. Always give honest, professional feedback on everything that you see, and always, no matter what you're telling them, accentuate the positive in every point that you make. It's so important to keep the communication lines open, to let them know that you're on their side, to let them know that you understand. So, you know, an example of that would be, this doesn't rhyme. That's a common issue with new writers. Here are some ways, you know, here are some resources you can turn to. Here are some books I recommend, you know, rhyming picture books for you to read. Go take a look at those. And, you know, I know you can do it. You got this far, let's go. Encourage questions. Never cut yourself off from answering questions that an author has about what you've edited or what you've recommended. Stay open to polite disagreement. You know, don't take abuse, but always be willing and open to change your own opinion, because you're not always right, or there might be another way. There might be a compromise. And know when know when it's your call to make, when you can demand something or when you can strongly suggest it, and when it's just really out of your hands. Okay, have I gone over time now? I thought so these are just some of my sample projects, and I was gonna show you, just briefly run through my roles for each of these. So up here is a new edition of Jane Eyre. I did not write that book, but in my in-house days, we decided we were selling to schools, and we were constantly creating materials to go with books like Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights, Dracula, you name it, all of those classic tales. And we realized that it would make us money to have our own editions. And so as developmental editor for that, I got to create the break-even forecasting thingy. I don't remember how to do it. But I showed that we could make money because we were selling Jane Eyre from other publishers left and right. I tracked down different public domain editions of the book and figured out what was closest to the original publication of the novel. One of my favorite things ever was that I happened to be in New York for something else, and I got to see Charlotte Bronte's original manuscript. The timing was just right for it, but I got to see that, you know, she had sentences that, in her handwriting, sentences that lasted 4 pages. And, you know, that's not how the book is. She was edited. And then I wrote the front matter and the cover copy, and, you know, then we had it copy edited and proofread a dozen times. Sherlock Holmes, this is a retold tales. I don't have that book, but I have another one in this series. This was a series of retold classic tales, and so my role as editor was to select each of the Sherlock Holmes tales to go in that anthology, or just to select. I had one called Tales of Courage. So they were different fairy tales. We did folk tales, classic tales, cultural tales, and that involved selecting the stories to retell, finding the authors to do it, and then, you know, working with the book as it went through the process in-house. And in that role, I did the physical editing. And if we needed an extra tale, I would write it. If something was not suitable to even be edited, or somebody didn't turn something in, or somebody plagiarized, I would step in and write what needed to be written. It was fun. American Revolution, again, that was just a nonfiction series on, American history. And so basically I hired the writers and did the editing myself, and again took it through design and layout. Same thing with Floods, a disaster series. This is a book called What Grandma Built. That's a picture book, and that was an author a self-publishing author who came to me, and this was a case where she had a story about her mother's death, and it was, a heartwarming story. It was a family story, and she'd been sharing, it was really for a family reunion, and it was also a downer. And I had to tell her that because she wanted to pursue publishing it, outside of self-publishing. And so I worked with her over the course of about a year, just reviewing her manuscripts, and she did something different each time. She retooled the story, made it more kid-focused, less on grandma dying in the bedroom. And it's funny, but I'm not making fun. It was a real story, and a real family story that they all felt very distinctly. And she got picked up by she went ahead and self-published it, and she promoted the bejeebers out of it. She got herself on TV, and a publisher picked it up. So, and it just came out from Harbor Publishing this spring. It's kind of cool. Bad Hair Day was, can you see the title in the hair? It's kind of hard to see in that photo. That's something where the author requested a developmental edit, and I didn't do it. And she also went away and worked on the book she worked on it 2 years. She joined SCBWI. I was telling somebody about Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and she started going to conferences and meetings and getting consultations, and she rewrote and rewrote. She sent it to me a completely different, it was a cute story concept to begin with, and again, the growth was phenomenal, and I still didn't want to do a developmental edit on it, so I copy edited it. And she self-published, and it's adorable. And The Curse, this is an interesting one. This is a young adult paranormal romance and time travel romance. Really cool. And it was a German book, a German bestseller, and this is an Amazon picked it up to republish for the US market. And I did the developmental edit, and for that book, that meant that this is the second book in a series of 3. It had a different translator than the first book, and the first book was already in press, at press. So it was coming out, and so I became very familiar with the first book, and so my job was and the author didn't speak English, and so we had translators talking between us, the Amazon editors. Nobody there read these books, and that's not typical. That was just that situation. They were just swamped, and it was like one of those circumstances, terrible circumstances. Somebody inherited another, too much work, and so they had someone step in, that was me, to make sure that all the references to the first book made sense, that all the scenes that were supposed to mirror the past life scenes in different ways did that. And then I wrote the cover copy because I had read the book and nobody was going to. And I think it did did pretty well. It was a really enjoyable project, actually. Itchy Pig is the one that didn't rhyme, and now it does. I'm extremely proud of her and the work that she did on that. And Hoop City is the book I told you about in the series, the young adult series that the author wrote 6 books in 9 months. And I'm also extremely proud of the work he did and that the other author of the other series did, because it was really difficult. But for both of them, again, all I did was do the evaluations. And in that case, I did have some, I was in a role where I said, you have to do this and this and this. And then if there's not enough time, we decide together what he could do or she could do. And then that's it. You're done with the developmental edit of that particular project. All right, quick to do. If you want to edit children's books, read them. If you want to write them, read them. There's no substitute for it. Read as many as you can, make a library date, go to the bookstore, sit with 20 picture books, or check out the latest young adult novels, however you want to do it, whatever you're drawn to. Of course, always keep developing your editorial skills, classes, workshops, reading, doing. To work with, you know this. You need to know, to work with children's fiction and nonfiction, you need to know the convention of fiction. You need to know what a plot looks like. You need to know if it's not there. I recommend that you immerse yourself by following, not immerse yourself in industry news, but follow the news, follow the markets, because the industry changes on a dime every day. The markets, evolve over time, and if you don't know that, you may not be giving the right advice or making the right decisions for the edits that you do. Look at things from the writer's side, so you know what they need to know, and not just what you know to be a good story, but how the writer can, what the writer needs to do to make it better. And also, again, empathize with the writers. They could use a friend. You don't have to be their best friend, but care about them. And then always keep in mind that you have to prioritize everybody's interests, especially as a freelancer, the writers, the publishers, whoever the client is, and yours. You need to know how much work you can do in a certain amount of time, what kind of work you like, what you don't, whether you're going to do editing or not for somebody, and get really good at diplomacy and letting go of content ownership, because it's really never your book. Now, I have recommended tools and resources. I have a handout you're going to get. That's fine. It's all there. It's 6 pages. I think you'll like it. And as a closing note, may or may not work. I'm going to try. I think I said this earlier. Hang on. So, what you need to do, my phone is connected. Take it as it comes. I added music right at the last minute just to stress myself out. I think it's all, these lyrics to me figuratively represent what we do as editors. You gotta do it. And that's it. Dance, sing, whatever you want. Thank you. He's not even singing yet. It's almost done. I gotta play it now. That's it. Carry on.
Thank you.
Could I have one question?
Yeah, oh, yes.
The sample projects that you did, and you said that Bad Hair Day, the author wanted a developmental edit, but you didn't want to do one. Could you tell us your thinking why you said you'd do a copy edit but not a dev edit? So
Well, yeah, what happened is, so the question was why the author wanted a developmental edit, I didn't want to do one, and we did a copy edit instead. And part of that was the money, to be perfectly frank, and the time. She had invested a lot already in the evaluation, and wasn't operating with a big budget for getting outside help. She wanted the edit to happen immediately because she already had plans in place for self-publishing. It was kind of like ready to go. And so what actually happened is that I proposed 3 different project approaches from that point, where I would do line editing or copy editing, or just proofreading. And then I also proposed within those parameters, either I make the changes or she does the changes. And I recommended that I made them because she just wasn't good at, she was very messy, she was a good writer, but very, not focused on seeing errors, or, kind of careless. But anyway, the money is really what that came down to, and she chose the copy edit with her making changes. And yeah, I'd forgotten that. Yes.
The underdog author guide, what's the name? Did you share out the name of one of those books? I just want to see what happened.
Oh yeah, it's called Hoop City, Los Angeles.
Hoop City, Los Angeles?
Yeah, the name of the
That's
young
one of
adult
the
author
6?
guide. Yes. Yeah. So
At
it's
the end of it, was he saying that was just such a great education? I imagine it's like boot camp for
Yes.
plotting, and
Yes.
he got a lot out of it.
Yeah, he did, and he's still writing, and we talked for one day very long and hard about whether he needed to talk through, they were offering him another deal. And and really a very similar situation with the other author of the teen pregnancy series. They had different, they were both really talented writers with different strengths, and she wrote the most unbelievable dialogue, but kind of didn't know anything about teens or pregnancy. So it was a reality thing. But yeah, so all the Hoop cities are all different cities, and then the 9 months, every book is called 9 months with a different girl's name. Yes?
So are there any tools or resources for knowing what kind of vocabulary is appropriate for certain writing levels?
Yes. So, and you'll see it on the handout, but my favorite is not in print anymore, but available on online sources and used bookstores. But it's called Children's Writers Word Book, and that's by Alejandra Mogilner, I believe. I'd have to look at my list to know if I'm remembering the name correctly. But it breaks down vocabulary by grade level and also developmental level. It's not the only source to look to, but you get a really good sense of appropriate vocabulary and language just by reading books of the correct level. And then, I've listed, I think, resources for kind of understanding what reading level you're writing to. That's largely instinctive, and then you can hone your skills at knowing it as you're editing for different levels. But that book is good, and the Scholastic Children's Dictionary is also a good resource for that.
Also, you said that there are often many rounds of editing and it can be pretty extensive. So how, you don't have to get specific, but like how, what is the payment structure? Does it depend? Like how, is it like a flat fee or is it like ongoing?
For
like working with either individual authors or publishers?
Okay, the question is about payment structures for extensive edits or multiple rounds of edits, either with authors or publishers. And with authors, you determine that with them. I mean, what I like to do is I determine my rate and I propose a flat fee. I look at the manuscript first. I kind of decide what I believe the work to be, and then I, think about how many hours it's going to take me, and then I create a flat fee based on that. And for individual authors, I give them a break. I don't charge them what I would initially ask for, and I also tell them that. I tell them that this is what I would get working for a publisher, what I expect. And then if multiple rounds are involved, there's a new fee for each thing. So my initial fee for one round of editing includes doing the edit and then there's a back and forth included in that. There's communication and maybe one more pass or something like that. So that's included. Any other questions? Yes, sorry.
You mentioned needing to find writers on certain projects.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering how you go about that.
Well, I know a lot of writers from my in-house days, and that's how I started finding writers, just because I already had people to poach. We already had the publishers I worked for had. I didn't repeat the question. I'm sorry. She asked how I go about finding writers when that's part of the role, and so I go to my Rolodex, which I don't know where that is anymore. I go to my electronic contacts list. I look for people that I already think might be right for the work. Sometimes I post an ad. I've posted ads on the EFA job list. I've posted ads, monster.com. I don't know if that still exists, but I've done that. I did that in the past, or other targeted job listing services. Put out the word, ask for referrals. Sometimes the publisher, as a freelancer, I'll ask the publisher for their list of writers, that kind of thing.
Where do literary agents come into play with all of this? I know some agents are really hands-on and you're just all about promoting the author, but others seem to kind of delve into developmental editing.
Yes. So
how does that kind of compare with what you do?
Okay, where do literary agents come into play? You're exactly right. Some are editorial agent, they'll usually say so on their websites or in their market listings, whether they're an editorial agent or just an all business agent. And so if you're if a writer is submitting to agents, which is what I recommend, rather than trying to go to publishers themselves, unless they have really done their homework and know what publishers are accepting submissions, number one, unagented submissions, and that their book is right for that publisher. Some agents do the editing themselves. Some agents have freelancers that they recommend, which isn't really cool. if they're profiting from that, then you shouldn't work with that agent, because the agent should never profit from you until they're selling your book. So that's a tip. If you're ever going to an agent and they want your book edited, they're willing to work with you themselves, they should be doing that for free. because they see that in your book. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
How do you know when an agent is profiting from an editor as opposed to they just have a list? Because I get half my business from agents who I've known for years.
Yeah.
They have on their website, here are 15 people who we recommend.
Yeah.
I'm not kicking back anything more than maybe Starbucks when they're in town.
Yeah. I think you just have to do your due diligence and look at the reputations of those agents.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. Many agents do list recommended editors, and I think that's usually a sign that they're legitimate. Whereas if you contact an agent and he or she says, "I'm putting you right in touch with our editor or this editor, and the fee is," it's more like you're going to get a sense that there's a business transaction happening here. And thank you very much.